Welcome to Crossroads. The State Department has revealed new details, and guess what? The Chinese Communist Party is in fact involved in the many organizations behind the mass protests sweeping across the United States. We've been saying it. It's now out there. State Department, Congress, all now talking about it. Also, speaking of mass protests and civil unrest, there was a push to have ICE agents wear body cams, right? Need to show what you're doing. And they've changed their mind suddenly, saying, you know what? Maybe that's not a good idea to show what they're actually seeing. I'll explain why. Also, on another topic, reparations for slavery are in fact happening. And maybe you're eligible. A city in Illinois has now given $25,000 payments to 44 black residents. We'll be talking about these topics a lot more today, as well as answering your questions. So make sure to hit the like button. Let's get started. And also, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So YouTube, Epoch TV, let's see, Moldegard, Bonnie Bali, we got YT User, California Gal, Ash from California, Seymour, Seymour Butts, thank you. Cali CYD, thank you all for being here. I will be watching the chat, so let me know what you think. Questions, comments during the show, let me know. First off, let me show you first what's happening here. We've been talking about it for a while now. Anybody who's watched Crossroads knows I've been exposing the Chinese Communist Party involvement in many things in the United States, whether it be surveillance, whether it be, for example, Operation Fox Hunt, where they were hunting down people in the U.S., threatening to kill them, kill their families, trying to make them commit suicide, deporting people back to China, kidnapping them, whether it be, for example, the secret Chinese police stations, the United Front, or whether it be fentanyl, drug trafficking, the whole nine yards, or whether it is the mass protests in Chinese Communist Party involvement. And guess what? That last part is now coming to the surface. The Chinese Communist Party has, in fact, had a hand in these protests sweeping across the country. A lot of them, in fact, including the ICE protests, including Black Lives Matter, including all these issues to an extent. And Congress actually recently held a hearing, and they exposed how the Chinese Communist Party is, in fact, involved in key organizations behind these protests. And now guess what? The State Department has also backed up Congress and revealed new details on these networks. Let me show you some of the public reporting on this. New York Post. It says, the State Department transmitted a report to Congress Tuesday linking lefty nonprofits, Code Pink and the People's Forum to Chinese influence operations. And it says this, quote, partisan hacks spent years peddling the phony Russia collusion hoax while turning a blind eye to the sprawling web of far-left activist organizations who push the agendas of the Chinese Communist Party. That's a quote from Undersecretary of State for Public Policy, that's Sarah Rogers, saying in a statement provided to the New York Post. She adds, quote, organizations like Code Pink and the People's Forum denigrate the United States, whitewash the violence of Marxist regimes like the CCP, and it says, and run cover for China while enjoying an influx of cash from a donor network with connections to the Chinese Communist Party. So basically you could ask, well, what are the Chinese connections? The big ones, CCP money, I read the report. They're getting money from individuals like in Shanghai, individuals in China. One of the biggest ones people have been pointing to is an Indian guy from the UK. His name is Neville Singh. He's a billionaire. He works in Shanghai. After Congress started raising concerns about this, they even called on him to testify. He's just kind of not showing up. He's in China. He's in China. After they pointed it out, he stopped giving the money. Like some of the money dried up. But it actually goes beyond that. It's not just like money coming from people in China. Some of this is other things. Some of what they discuss is, for example, operations, narratives. They hold organization meetings and stuff like that where they're praising the Chinese Communist Party, denigrating the United States, requiring members to have propagandizing things about China and so on. Doing trips to China. Like, there's a lot of weird integration with the CCP, even outside of the funding And this has been coming out in some of the testimony, some of the different reports coming out. It adds this, quote, it says the State Department will pursue complete transparency for the donor and NGO networks that lobby for our adversaries and seek to weaken the resolve of the United States. And this is a big deal too, because the NGO networks, these non-governmental organizations, this is becoming a much bigger narrative within politics right now in the U.S. A few examples of this, okay? Let me list out a few things that's happening. Well, one is, of course, Chinese Communist Party involvement within NGO networks. That's a big thing. It turns out that there might be foreign interest, foreign money, and it's not even limited to China. This is becoming a much broader problem. One of the issues being raised is because of the way some of these nonprofits work and these NGOs work, there's a bit of a black box type scenario where you can't really tell where the money is coming from. They have a lot of money. They have been finding Chinese Communist Party involvement. Even that is limited. We don't fully know how much money is coming from China or other countries for that matter. Some of this is not even China. Some of it is European powers, government organizations, state-run organizations trying to push their political agendas using NGOs as kind of the vehicle to achieve it. That's another thing being exposed. But even outside of that, what else is happening? Under the Trump administration, USAID, which does not mean US aid, it's like basically nation building type stuff or donor type stuff. A lot of that used to go through NGOs. One of the problems raised by the Trump admin, these NGOs have not really been doing things in the interest of the United States in many regards. What they've been doing is they've been taking the money from the US government, using that to fund their organizations. They're doing very minimal efforts to achieve what the original mission was. Like, you give them, it's known with some of these groups, you give them $100 and maybe 10 cents of that actually goes to the needy children. Most of the money goes to organizational structures, bureaucracy, overhead costs, that kind of thing. And then what you also have happening is while you're funding these organizations, you're paying their bills basically. They're doing minimal operations of the thing you pay them for, and they're using the rest of their time to do other things you did not pay them to do. And that might be political advocacy against the United States. That might be, for example, organizations and infrastructures representing foreign interests. This is not only being raised through USAID and foreign aid, which is different from USAID. It's also one of the issues raised on U.S. involvement with the United Nations. This is an official Trump administration policy now, where they're telling the UN, if you want us to keep giving money, we want to have more of a direct UN operation where you're trying to stop wars and you're trying to stop abuses and you're standing up against maybe mass censorship. They want to avoid giving money to NGOs. They want to start cutting the NGOs out of the picture. There's also broader kind of transnational government type things. One example being the World Economic Forum. And they're a forum. You could argue that they don't have things they're doing themselves, but in terms of the membership structure, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about a multi-stakeholder world order. What does that mean? It means you have elected government and you have unelected government. So at the seat of power, you have the government officials, you have people within governments representing, kind of like a United Nations type things, but sitting alongside them at the table, you have major corporations because they're the power players. You have NGOs because they're the power players. You have major investors who are quote-unquote community leaders because they're the power players. And so they want to have kind of a shared governance, meaning you give political power to organizations that are not elected government. And at the kind of seat of kind of globalism, that is one of the ideas. We see this being carried out, for example, in the United States through community schools. We see this being carried out in the United States with the public-private partnerships on censorship. This is not some like far-flung thing. Actual political power is in fact being given to NGOs. And so when they're calling out these NGOs right here in terms of maybe being tied in with Chinese Communist Party operations, that's a big deal because this is delegitimizing not all the NGOs, but some of them. Now it continues saying this. It says the report on countering foreign information manipulation and interference alleges that China, the Chinese Communist Party, quote, spreads propaganda through influence campaigns run by nonprofit organizations like Code Pink, the People's Forum, and groups linked with the notorious Singham network. Again, that's Neville Singh, right? It says the so-called Singham network are nonprofits funded by tech mogul Neville Roy Singh, whose wife is a co-founder of Code Pink. And this is interesting because, a lot of people say, oh, these billionaires funding these organizations. And, a lot of heat goes on George Soros. He's not the only one. And you could argue there's some that are a lot more tied in with other foreign interests. Neville Roy Singh, based in China, is one of the big ones they're talking about with this. And it says this, Singham, an American expat living in China, quote, works closely with the Chinese government media machine and is financing its propaganda worldwide. And it says the New York Times, which ironically has been doing Chinese propaganda also, it says they reported that in 2023 and says, quote, Chinese diplomats, state media, and pro-China influencers use social media, content sharing agreements, and local partnerships to publish pro-CCP propaganda. The report continues and says China invests in public diplomacy, exchanges, reporting tours, and educational and cultural initiatives to boost its image. Now, what does that mean? As a journalist, I've been reporting on this for, again, close to 2 decades. In fact, again, this kind of stuff has been my wheelhouse. If you're asking, well, Josh, have you gone to China? The simple answer is no. That would be a one-way trip for me, and I would never come back. If I ever want to disappear from the face of the earth, you'll see me book a trip to China. Why is that? It's because they've been threatening to kill me since the early 2000s, okay? Because I've been reporting this stuff, or late 2000, 2008 roughly to about 2012. What is actually happening with this, right? So it says China invests in public diplomacy exchanges, reporting tours, and educational and cultural initiatives to boost its image. A couple things on this. The Chinese Communist Party has been paying online influencers to run their propaganda. Basically, one of the things going around, any YouTube page with over 300,000 followers, they've been messaging them, offering to pay them money, inviting them on propaganda tours to China. They've been doing this to TikTokers, and a lot of them are taking the money. Epoch Times actually had a story on this where we noted some of our own journalists actually received weird emails or online, I believe it was done through X, weird online messages. Chinese agents were offering cryptocurrency in exchange for information. When these individuals were investigated, it was found that they were using fake images. They were using these weird websites that they had established, and they were trying to pay people to run CCP propaganda or feed into their propaganda networks. Another example, Tim Pool. Everybody, I think most people know Tim Pool. He's a YouTuber. He used to be with Vice. He's kind of gone. He's more like libertarian, I assume. He actually came out publicly, and he said on his show that he was offered, it wasn't much money, it was like a couple $100, but he was offered money by some weird online actor to publish fake information, propaganda against Epoch Times and Falun Gong. We found, for example, that the New York Times was running non-stop hit pieces against Shen Yun Performing Arts, a New York-based performing arts company, which just mirrored CCP propaganda. We interviewed some of their sources afterwards. They said New York Times was misquoting them, quoting them out of context, and also they were not reporting on the other full context of information. It was very one-sided propaganda-type pieces. We found that one of the authors, her father, is tied in with the CCP, tied in, of course, with the United Front Tong structures. We also found through investigations that a network of fake accounts on X was boosting all of the reporting. We actually and through our investigations, because we wanted answers from X, one of our journalists actually emailed X pointing out these thousands upon thousands of what looked like fake accounts boosting the New York Times fake reporting against Shen Yun, which is like public enemy number one of the CCP. And it turned out that yes, It turned out these were fake accounts, meaning the New York Times running this propaganda, running these fake reports, was being boosted by what looked like, and what turned to be fake accounts, but what looked like Chinese Communist Party actors. At the same time, the CCP was running other propaganda campaigns. At the same time, the CCP was trying to offer money to people to publish fake information. At the same time, the CCP is inviting journalists and YouTubers and TikTokers on propaganda tours of China. People have seen, for example, some of these propaganda tours. You know, one of these guys, I Show Speed, big TikToker, big on Twitch, I believe. He actually went to China. It wasn't like he was doing like human rights propaganda, but you know, they took him on kind of an image tour for China. I don't think he was aware of what he was doing personally, but that's one example of this. Now, there's some other very big names. Hassan Piker, he went on this big propaganda tour of China. That was a big thing too. So a lot of them have been accepting these propaganda tours. Now, is that tied in with this? Well, yeah, obviously. That is one of the things the CCP is doing. Is that tied in with the operations to propagandize, denounce the United States, push the CCP's human rights abuses? Slightly different, but they are putting powder on the CCP's face in light of this broader operation the CCP is pushing. And part of this operation the CCP is pushing involves the mass protests on American streets. It continues saying this. Code Pink, one of the organizations, Code Pink, one of the many allegations against them, encourages Americans to travel to China and solicits contact information of individuals interested in visiting the U.S. adversary. In addition to, again, running these protests across the United States. It says, meanwhile, the New York-based People's Forum praises the Chinese Communist Revolution and studies it as a potential model for revolutionary leftists in the United States, according to the State Department. Meaning, this is not some random thing. This is not some rumor. In the chat, Seymour, you were saying China never plays by the rules. This was before he said this. China never plays by the rules, but they hold us to them. China acts like it is an undeveloped country or underdeveloped country that needs assistance from the U.S., while at the same time has an economy growing twice as fast as ours. So the funny thing with the Chinese economy, look, over 400 million Chinese, this is according to one of their own government officials, live in like absolute poverty. You're talking about people making like $140 a month. They're living like they're in the Middle Ages, like worse. They're living like peasants in the Middle Ages. You have a huge amount of Chinese in China living in just absolute squalor. You're talking just poverty, like the poorest places you see on those Help the Kids commercials on TV. That is what the real China looks like. When they do these propaganda tours and they show you the neon lights on the sides of the buildings and the drones doing drone shows and everyone's clapping their hands, wow. They're not showing you the real China. What they're often showing you is, again, the Chinese Communist Party members. And they're leading you through this little Truman Show type illusion. Hey, Truman, good morning to you. Top of the morning, YouTuber. You know, that kind of thing. It's not real. They're not showing you the true picture. They're not showing you people who've been canceled by the system because they believe in democracy and have to be homeless because they've been debanked and they live on the streets. They're not showing you the people working 9-9-6, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week, because, again, that's like the normal work schedule. They're not showing you the Christians who have to practice their religion underground because the surface churches have altered the Bible and have eliminated the first commandment. They're not showing you these kinds of things. They're not showing you the Muslim Uyghurs who are enslaved running the garment industries. They're not showing you the Falun Gong practitioners being tortured like in the Inquisition, stretching racks, rape using electric batons, documented cases, by the way, including by the United Nations, live organ harvesting, re-education through labor. They're not showing you that. Why are they not showing you that? It's because that's the real China, and they're not showing you the real China. The other problem you have is a lot of the big media, too. You could argue, even aside from journalists being bought out, even aside from the fact that if you have journalists in China reporting, they're not allowed to report the truth, or they get kicked out and your media gets kicked out, meaning if you're operating there, you are not telling the truth, you're not allowed to. Aside from that, you also have the problem that a lot of these companies are run by mega corporations. You're talking like 6 corporations, 5 to 6, running most of the media. And they have shareholders, and they have special interest, and the businesses have business in China that they don't want to risk. And they will not tell you the truth because of this, because they cannot if they want to not have their business interests harmed. There's a giant masquerade going on, a giant power play going on, and they are lying through their teeth because of special interest. That is the unfortunate reality. Now, back to the point, though, just a few more points on, again, these organizations tied in with the CCP, running protests on America's streets. Why do they do that? Why do they do that? I can tell you because I've been researching this for almost 2 decades, and here's why. Okay, so the slogan of the Chinese Communist Party is this. They want to control what they call the civil society. This is part of the United Front, part of their surface organizational structure. Mao Zedong referred to the United Front as a magic weapon of the Chinese Communist Party. Xi Jinping, the current leader, has echoed that exact same statement, saying the United Front is their quote-unquote magic weapon. What is the United Front? It's a network of organizations in other countries that work as the front line of the Chinese Communist Party to control, undermine, and subvert those countries. And the goal is to take over what they call civil society. What is civil society? It is media, it is politicians, it is business, it is investment, it is education. And so if you control these things, you effectively have achieved, you've achieved what you would achieve if you conquered the country. If Russia were to roll into Ukraine and win the war and conquer the entire country, what would that look like? It would mean the media would not be allowed to criticize them. The media would be state-run and government-controlled. It would mean that critics would be controlled or thrown out of the country or whatever else. It would mean the government was controlled by another country. It would mean the businesses and the natural resources were controlled by another country. It would mean the investors and all the big players and the politicians would be run by another country. You can achieve that without invading a country. The method the CCP uses to achieve that is called the United Front Work Department, or United Front Work. Jamestown Foundation actually just published a huge report on it. I want to go into this in a future episode. They identified around 2,000 organizations of the CCP carrying out this work as part of the United Front. A future episode will go into that. Huge stuff happening right now across the board. And so if you capture this civil society, what does that mean? It means you've been inviting government officials on trips to China, you're propagandizing them, you're blackmailing them, you're getting them involved in honey traps with underage girls, and you're blackmailing them, that kind of thing, okay? That happens on a very broad scale globally. It means you're doing the same thing to business leaders. You're making backroom deals. You're giving, one of the most common things you'll find is that they, aside from blackmail, there's a lot of money involvement. So they'll give like, okay, what is the easiest way to pay you off? What's the easiest way to pay someone off? You don't give them money. You don't send them $1 million in the mail and say, hey, come get your gold bars. No, they give your son or your spouse a position, an advisory position at a Chinese company. And it is a legitimate paid position where you don't have to do any work, okay? You don't have to do any work. Maybe you go there and have a phone call with them. You're an advisor. They'll give one of your family members an advisory position at one of their companies. They will give you a business contract. Maybe an organization you run will get a very juicy contract with a Chinese company. These kinds of things is how they pay you. Or, hey, come to China. We'll pay you $40,000 to speak at an event. Ha ha. And they pay you. They pay you. There's easy ways to pay someone off in ways that look legitimate when you're a government that runs the businesses, right? Because again, they have public-private partnerships or state-run businesses. A lot of big businesses in China are state-owned enterprises, meaning they're not independent, they're government agencies. So if they give you something through a business, it's also a government contract. There are strings attached to it. They do the same thing with college professors. They invite them on speaking tours to China, they butter them up, and they start eating out of their hands. They start giving them little gifts. And those little gifts turn into big gifts. And before you know it, those college professors are again working as Chinese Communist Party agents. They do the same thing to journalists. They do the same thing to YouTubers. They do the same thing to TikTokers. They feed them narratives. They give them, whistleblower information, and they mislead them, and they give them juicy stories because they want to use them to run their propaganda. And you see a lot of media doing this. You see a lot of media doing it. You see a lot of YouTubers doing it. You see a lot of little puppet show, finger puppets doing it, because that is the name of the game. And this is modern warfare. This is United Front work. This is how the Chinese Communist Party runs its operations. Lastly, before we go into a bit more, how does this tie into the protests on the streets? In America, in a country where we have elections, right? We go and vote at the polls. We choose our government, representatives, right? We have a republic, which is what we are, is what you call representative democracy. We're a representative democracy, meaning we elect people to represent us in the democratic process. That's Congress, that's your local government officials, that's the President of the United States. These are they represent your interests in the structure of government. We elect them. What gets you voting? The information you're exposed to. Do you think Trump is evil baby Hitler? Do you think Trump is the guy saving America? That's going to depend on what media you read, frankly. If you're reading one news outlet, they're going to tell you one worldview. If you're reading another, they're going to tell you another worldview. That is the reality of our country, okay? What issues do you care about? It depends on what media you are reading. If you believe ICE agents are a bunch of masked individuals grabbing people off the street, camping out outside of schools and kidnapping children, that's because you've been reading a media that's been telling you that. Your notion has been created by the media you read, or the information you're watching, or the rumors you hear. And a lot of those rumors are part of that same thing. It depends on what media you're watching. If you believe ICE agents are out there doing God's work and they're again going after murderers and rapists and fentanyl traffickers and gang members, it's because you've been watching a media that has been telling you that, or you're watching a YouTuber who has been telling you that, or you're watching videos or reading statements that tell you that. That's the reality. If you watch my show, you'll know that I'm part of the latter one. I'm like, yeah, these are criminal aliens. It's not all, it's I think like 70% or something like that. I know the media is saying that most of them are not like convicted criminals. There's been counterpoints from the federal government noting there's a difference between convicted and non-convicted criminal, and that's where a lot of the gray area is. If you want to know the full context of that, just as context. But my point in saying that is this. The information you're exposed to informs the way you view things. The information you're exposed to informs who you vote for. It informs what you care about. It informs who you like. It informs who you hate. It informs your worldview. And if a foreign country can do something, create a protest that gets media attention and gets government talking about it and makes everybody hyper-focused on it, they control the narratives that are the issues for the election. So whoever commands public attention commands voters, and whoever commands voters controls the country. That's why they're doing this. That's why they're doing this. And the unfortunate reality, like it or not in America, is we have a weird system where we have the election protests, okay? We had BLM, we had the No Kings riots, now we have the anti-ICE protests. It is the same thing. And it just so happens it's not all of them. I know there's plenty of people just going out and protesting, but there are in fact major communist organizations, the People's Forum, the Party of Liberation and Socialism, another one's been exposed now with CCP ties. I'll name some that aren't even listed here. The Rainbow Coalition, these kinds of groups, tied in with Democratic Socialists of America. The Chinese Progressive Association, one of the organizations that BLM used to redirect its donations to, which is, by the way, tied in with the Little Red Guard of China. New York Times tried debunking it. They lied to you. They said it was not the same one. It's because they were saying the branch on the East Coast is not the same as the branch on the West Coast. It's like arguing that it's not Walmart if you're pointing to a problem at like the New York Walmart versus the California Walmart. It's a stupid narrative. They were the ones where the donations for Black Lives Matter used to redirect to. Again, the Chinese Progressive Association. You have a lot of these groups that are the ones puppeteering mass protests in America. They're the ones doing this. Why are they doing it? It's because they control the narrative. If they control the narrative, they decide what people perceive. They can manipulate their little puppet journalists, and they can pull the strings of politics. That's why they do it. On a broader scale, you would call this a color revolution. Other countries do it too. Let's be fair, America does color revolutions. Every country does. And the CCP is doing it on American streets. That's why this matters so much. That's why this matters so much. Just looking at the comments, Ashley from TME, you're saying, Josh, do you see any light at the end of the tunnels? Yeah, I do. It's being exposed. It's a big deal. I mean, again, some people would say I'm like slightly black-pilled. It's because I've been watching this stuff for so long and have not seen anything done on it. In my eyes, I'm now seeing something done about it. Like, I'm finally seeing something done about it. For me, this is a breath of fresh air. I'm finally seeing these networks getting exposed. I'm finally seeing the United Front just got exposed. Jamestown Foundation did a report exposing like 2,000 organizations tied in with it. I'm seeing Congress talking about this. Finally, it's great. I'm seeing the State Department call it out. For me, this is a breath of fresh air. It sounds, for a lot of you, because you're probably hearing some of this for the first time, unless you've been watching Crossroads, you're probably hearing about this for the first time, so you're like, oh my gosh. For me, even seeing it being talked about means finally something is being done. It was very discouraging for a long time for me because I've been watching how big of an issue this is, and I've seen very little done about it. I'm finally seeing something being done. This is like fresh water in the desert for me. It's been a very rough journey for the past couple decades. Investigating these networks, exposing networks, being threatened by these networks. Finally, something is being done. Let's see here. In YouTube chat, let's see. Amber Riley saying it's good to hear from Joshua to say this. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Moldegard, you're saying please stop with the Bible botting. Yeah, people have their views. I understand. Moldegard, you're saying double plus to you. Talking in the chat. Anyways, folks, thanks for being here. Again, I'm watching the chat as we go. I'm kind of restructuring Crossroads. We're trying to make it a little more interactive as the show goes on. Also, real quick, again, I'm still going to go, but we have also a new show every Thursday, so stay tuned for that. Today, it's going to be later today. But let's go further into what's happening. Speaking of mass protests and civil unrest, well, guess what? There was a push to have ICE agents wear body cams, and that's actually being reversed now. Why do they not want ICE agents to wear body cams? It's kind of a funny answer. I'll be talking about this more after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
Welcome back. So a mass protests spreading across the United States right now, the anti-ICE movements. There was a push to have ICE agents. It's kind of the resolve to this. They want to have ICE agents wear body cams. And guess what? They were saying these masked individuals are out there abducting people on the streets, pushing people, shoving people, being violent, and they need to wear body cams so we can hold them accountable. Why does that matter? It's because if a federal officer or a police officer, if you believe they've done something illegal, you're going to want to have a video footage of the incident, because the video footage is going to be useful for court. If you sue them for abuse and use of force, if you sue them for unjustified or unlawful arrest, you need the video, and it's very helpful for that. But suddenly, the people pushing this narrative are saying, you know what? Actually, we change our minds. It is bad if you wear body cams. We don't want ICE wearing body cams. So the question is, why did they suddenly do a 180? They wanted ICE agents to wear body cams. Now they really, really, really do not want ICE agents wearing body cams. Well, there's mixed things here, and I'll talk about all sides of it. I'll talk about one side first. Let me show you the left-wing narrative. Part of this is because they believe that this could lead to maybe ICE agents doxing, punishing protesters. Politico said this. It says, left-wing organizations, but they say, a push to put body cameras on all ICE agents has Democrats running headlong into a new problem. Fear that the technology will provide another avenue for mass surveillance of protesters. These cameras on the bodies of police will allow them to surveil protesters. It says congressional Democratic leaders have made universal use of body cameras one of their prime demands for imposing accountability on immigration and custom enforcement, especially after federal agents fatally shot 2 American citizens in Minneapolis. They don't tell you what one of those American citizens was, again, assaulting an agent with a deadly weapon, hitting an agent with her car when she was shot. The other one did something stupid, which is he brought a gun to a protest. The gun apparently went off and he got shot. It was a SIG variant that does have a problem of discharging, by the way. Probably not a good idea to bring a gun to a protest and have it go off. It notes, though, but after an outcry from privacy advocates that surveillance tools will allow ICE agents to identify and track protesters, Democrats are also calling for restrictions on how the body cameras can be used. So, wear body cameras, but don't wear body cameras. It says lawmakers and legal observers have accused ICE of leveraging a variety of cameras to surveil protesters. And, okay, to be fair, I can see some of the arguments for this, and I'll give my take, because I'm generally not a fan of mass surveillance. I'll give my take, but let me go into this first, okay? It says they've been leveraging a variety of cameras to surveil protesters, feeding pictures into license plate readers and facial recognition systems. And it's Democrats now worry that the body cameras they're demanding could be used for similar purposes. Let me explain 2 sides of this, okay? So they're not, in my opinion, in my personal take, they're not completely wrong on this. There is a problem of government surveillance, and especially when it's pervasive, ongoing surveillance. There is an issue, for example, where some of the technology systems involve non-government surveillance tools, cameras on freeways that are tied into like Amber Alert systems and so on. They're run by private companies, and they effectively do like ongoing surveillance. Now, in the Constitution, you need to have a search warrant for certain types of investigations. Some people would argue that type of continuous surveillance is unconstitutional. I would actually agree. The issue is, though, we have a thing in the United States where there's basically private businesses are not held to the same standards. This is why, for example, private companies can do ongoing surveillance and then sell or have warrant searches of that data by law enforcement. And you could argue, well, law enforcement went through a warranted process to get it. That means that effectively ongoing surveillance is, accessible at the very least, if not being provided actively to law enforcement. Now, for law enforcement, that's a great thing. You can track murderers, you can track rapists, you can track kidnappers. You can make a very good argument for why you need that. On the other side, it could lead to mass abuse of the rights of Americans. I tend to be the kind of person who is kindly non-cooperative on anything that I view as a constitutional violation. Even though I'm a nice guy in most regards, I tend to not agree to unconstitutional searches and seizures. I tend to not allow that. I will be friendly if they do have probable cause or things like that, of course. But in terms of my view on rights and my view on these things, if you don't uphold your rights, you are effectively allowing it to be violated. And it's not long before, it's like if you let your friend come in your house when you're not there and eat from your refrigerator every day. They might do it nicely a few times. Eventually, it's going to be the norm. Okay? Anybody ever have a friend like that? And once it becomes the normal, it's going to be very hard to tell them they can't do it anymore. Right? It's the same thing when you start allowing your rights to be violated, in the way I view it. The other problem you have is, for example, social media doing ongoing surveillance of your communications, your chat messages, your friend networks, your interests, what you search for, your political views, the advertisements you look for. It's these search engines which collect data on what you're looking for, what you're buying. Some of them even have, if you give it access to it on your smartphone, ongoing surveillance of audio, video. Google was recently called out for this. There's a feature apparently you have to turn off. It's been there for a long time, which does active audio recording unless you turn it off or opt out of it. And these things are, of course, you could say, well, it's being used for advertisers. It's not like part of some creepy government thing. The problem is government gets it. Not just American government, but even foreign government. So if they issue a warrant, if they demand, hey, in my country, you need to provide that actively, you have China getting this type of data, you have foreign law enforcement getting this type of data, you have intelligence agencies getting this type of data, and that means you have effectively what I would regard as I would say unconstitutional, others would argue gray area constitutional violation of rights. And also a problem of foreign surveillance, a problem of foreign law enforcement, a problem of international law, and a problem where you could argue it has its uses, but it is subjecting us to ongoing surveillance. Back to the body cameras, that's part of the logic Democrats are using to say we probably shouldn't have this. ICE agents are actually using a very broad network of public-private partnerships and other forms of surveillance and documenting to track illegals. Now, the other side of me is saying, well, how else are they going to do it? If you have rapists and murderers and gang members, frankly, you probably should have that type of surveillance to go after them. I think if you have 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, 40 million people violating American law, and it's leading to soaring housing costs, a lack of American jobs, the quality of life is just being decimated by high competition and low supply, high demand, low supply. Yeah, you can't do that to the American people. And so maybe there is a needed solution to this. Is this the solution that we should want? I don't know. Can you put the genie back in the bottle? That's the big question, right? If you allow this to happen, can you put the genie back in the bottle? Maybe, maybe not. The other side too, though, when it comes to body cameras and surveillance, if you also have foreign involvement with some of these protesters, well, if this is in fact maybe a Chinese color revolution, yeah, you probably should have some kind of national security level investigation, tracking, looking into, monitoring of communications, because this could be a color revolution. This could be a foreign act of terrorism. It could be that level of things. It is even interfering in our elections. That's a big deal too. On the Republican side of it, the other side of it too, let me ask you all a big question. What destroyed Black Lives Matter? What was the thing that brought an end to the narrative? There were two things that ended Black Lives Matter. One was like bad use of donations and money laundering, where you had people being like, donate to the cause. And they were like buying mansions using all the donations. Anybody remember that? The other thing that destroyed Black Lives Matter, guess what? Communism. The chat, James, you're funny. That too. Turned out they came out and said they were trained Marxists, by the way, and also their donation page was redirecting to the Chinese Progressive Association, which was tied in, of course, with the Chinese Communist Party's Little Red Guard. I should know. They covered it up, by the way. But my point here is the other big thing that ended Black Lives Matter, at least on the public scale, was, guess what? Body cameras. Why is that? It's because the media would come out and the big, the news organizations and these NGOs and these front organizations would come out and say, evil police shot an unarmed man. And they're like, really? Let's pull up the body camera footage. Uh-oh. Let's pull up the body camera footage. And after the media was running stories like daily, big scandal, another guy shot, police violence, and you pull up the body cam footage and you see this guy like frozen, like mid-stab with like a knife in his hand. And he has this like vicious look on his face and it's like twisted. He's like this, and you're like, oh, that's the guy they shot. There was like one of the scandals going around. The media was saying, oh, police shot this unarmed woman, went to her door. And, you watch the body cam footage and it's this crazy lady. She comes out in like a bathrobe and she has a knife in her hand and she's like swinging the knife at the police officer. And the police officer is like matrix dodging this knife. Like, I don't know how the guy, maybe he did get stabbed, but it's amazing he didn't lose his life actually. Deals with this for a while, like dodging knife attacks, before finally he ends up shooting and killing the woman. You could argue whether that was justified or not. And then you're like, well, you know what? That was kind of a justified shooting. The officer probably should have shot that lady a little earlier, frankly, because his life was in danger. The lady was obviously out of her mind, and she was not going to be giving that up. The officer was obviously defending his life. Another big one that went around, it was a traffic stop. This was like a more recent one. Guy gets out, acts crazy, lunges at the officer again with a knife. And, you have this like kind of frozen in time image of this guy with this like twisted, vicious face going at the officer with a knife. And the officer, whether you agree with it or not, shot and killed this man. Was that justified use of force? Yes, legally it was. Do you like it? Well, you can have your opinion on that, but justified use of force, yes, it was. If you're trying to kill a police officer, like it or not, they are allowed to shoot you. That is exactly why they carry guns, in fact. So Black Lives Matter was basically destroyed by body cams. Body cams destroyed the movement. And the funny thing was, I remember talking to police officers pretty early on about this, and they were telling me this. This actually goes back to even the Obama administration. Towards the end of the Obama administration, they started making it as part of the whole, racial justice movement. It was Obama and Jesse Jackson, all those guys. They were calling for police to wear body cameras. And then police started wearing body cameras, and they're like, okay, never mind, stop wearing body cameras. They actually tried rolling back the policy, but it was too late. Police were like, you know what, we kind of like wearing body cameras now because this actually helps me defend myself in court when these people sue me. Because part of the movement during that time also is they wanted to have it so police, if you get sued as a police officer, the court, your legal defense would not be paid for by taxpayer dollars. And so they're like, well, look, if we're going to have to defend ourselves, I want to have evidence. So police didn't want to get, police were like, yes, let me keep the body cam. This thing is a saving grace for me. And again, what you watched is the body cameras destroyed the whole protest. They destroyed the whole movement. And so they moved on to other things. You know what I mean? Same thing with these anti-ICE riots. What are you seeing with these anti-ICE riots? You're seeing protesters calling ICE agents the N-word. Black ICE agents. Funny story. And you could argue it's a little controversial, but it's kind of funny. There was that guy who brought a gun to the protest and got shot, and they were claiming it was like a racial issue. The guy was he was a white guy who got shot by an ICE agent, right? They actually doxed the ICE agent. And it turns out people were joking. They were like, oh, like all this stuff. The ICE agent would normally be a protected class because he's a homosexual Hispanic, okay? Like a Spartan type guy, you know what I mean? Like he's like buff and stuff like that. And, he's not the kind of guy who fits with their narrative typically. It wasn't like a racist thing or like a gender thing. And so he kind of destroyed the whole gender race narrative when it turned out that, the protester who was shot and killed was killed by like a homosexual, Hispanic ICE agent, right? Kind of destroyed the narrative. But again, it's because they're doxing people, and when they dox them or get the body cameras in doxing undermines the narrative they were trying to push, frankly, okay? We're living in crazy times, and I don't really care about race or gender stuff, but because they made it such a big deal, we have to talk about it sometimes, all right? Anyways, question in the chat from before. Giovanna Bradshaw, you're saying people who crash our border and live on our money do many things to hide. They know it's illegal and morally wrong. Whether they go on to harm citizens should not be the criteria for deportation. Is the administration only focusing on criminals so there is less pushback? I mean, this is the problem you have with mass illegal immigration in the U.S. If you allow a crime to go unpunished for too long, you normalize it. I grew up kind of living all over the place. My dad was a big surfer. We used to go into Costa Rica in the winters. I'm not Costa Rican, but we'd go there to surf. Osa Peninsula, great wave. If you're a surfer, fantastic waves. We were out in Monopolo, actually. Amazing waves. If you're a surfer, you would love the area. But, you had to leave every few months because if you overstay your visa, if you get a visa to go to some of these Latin American countries and you overstay it, you're going to have a very bad time. The first time you violate it, they kick you out of the country and you can't come back. You can never come back like that, you know what I mean? If you go back again, they arrest you. In a lot of countries, including in Latin America, including in Mexico, if you overstay your visa, you are going to face criminal charges, you are going to face fines. You're not just going to be kicked out and told, hey, come back tomorrow. You're going to have a very bad time. Canada, for a long time, was viewed as kind of, the friendly neighbors to the north, the kind of, far left, poster child. Why can't you be more like your sister type thing? You know what I mean? Like that was Canada for a long time. Canada and Australia, until recently, have merit-based migration. You need to show that you can actually benefit the country if you're going to migrate there. They do not tolerate mass illegal immigration until recently. And they were the poster child. America, for some reason, which has the biggest open door literally of any country on earth, until now where you have like Spain giving just mass citizenship or whatever, or amnesty. America was for a very long time, until like now with all these migrant movements, was the nicest country on earth for mass migration. We allow huge amounts of legal migrants, and we also allow people to violate the law with almost no repercussions. Now, what message does that send? It means for a lot of these people, they think that they have the justified right to come here. Well, look, if you're saying I could go there and I can get a job and you'll give me services and I can, get health care and this state's not going to punish me and they're going to protect me, well, heck, I'm going to do it. Why not? And a lot of them built lives here committing a crime, but a crime that was technically allowed to be committed, right? And so you've had it now where people feel that although they've committed crimes, they do not view it as a crime, because it has been a crime that is not punished. It's a crime that's not enforced, and it's been allowed to be violated. And so what you've had happen is you've had people build entire lives within the violation of a crime. You've had people do that. And now that the law is being enforced, they're like, oh my gosh, you're literally Hitler. You know what I mean? How dare you enforce a law that I knew I was violating for the past 20 years? You know what I mean? And that's kind of where we're at as a country right now. You're noting that, is the administration only focusing on criminals, so is there less pushback? So the Trump administration, I think, is focusing mainly on criminal aliens because it's less controversial. The irony with that is there's a difference between what the media deems as controversial and the political machine deems as controversial versus what the American citizen views as controversial. So if you read the media and if you watch your local politician talk about it, they make it sound like ICE is like the Gestapo. Do you have illegal aliens under your floorboards, muchacho? And you hear like Latin music, like gently in the background. You're like, because I'm joking. It was a meme going around. They make it sound like that. When in reality, if you look at polling, I mean, it's over 70%, which is, it's not everybody. 80% in some cases. Even if you go by CNN polling, in fact, who support deportation, not just of criminals, but of every single person violating migration laws. That's a lot of people. Now, that still means that 30% of Americans maybe agree with the media to an extent where they don't want literal deportations of every illegal alien. But this is like an 80-20 issue. You know what I mean? This is an 80-20 issue. I think for the Trump administration, the reason they're not treating this like an 80-20 issue is because of the bad media coverage. And they need to have a counter narrative on the media front. And I think that's why they're doing it, frankly. Even though this is the popular issue, the hard reality is a lot of people are emotional thinkers. Let's be honest with ourselves. A lot of people are emotional thinkers. And even if they agree on the 80-20, even if they agree deport everybody, if they're hearing on the media every single day, evil masked people are stealing children and raiding people's homes and deporting grandma, they might change their mind because they're being fed these narratives constantly. That's the media they're watching. There's no strong counter narrative. It's going to change their opinions eventually. And so there is an opinion warfare going on, on that front. Another story here, though. Details are also emerging on, guess what? Okay, let me paint this picture. During the 2020 elections, do you remember what happened? Trump was winning Trump was actually winning election night 2020. I was there as a journalist. Some of you who've been watching Crossroads for a long time. It was actually on NTD. I was covering it. I was one of the guest panelists. Anybody who's been watching this for a long time probably remembers it. And, election night 2020, watch it live. And we were watching the polls. Midnight rolls around, 11 o'clock rolls around. Trump had it in the bag, basically. Anybody watching the show at the time might remember I was saying, okay, based on numbers, based on trajectory, based on number of votes counted, basically Trump has it in the bag. He's going to win. You know what I mean? We were kind of questioning why other media were not calling the election, because based on numbers alone, there was basically no chance Trump was going to lose. Again, if you were looking at the trajectory of how votes were going and the trajectory of votes counted, number of votes left, basically Biden had no chance of winning. And so, if you watched me that night, I was saying this. I was like, yeah, has it in the bag. Then we're like, oh, something weird just happened. In Georgia, they just froze the counting of votes. They had to put it on hold. And Fulton County in Georgia became the main focus of that. It was like a plumbing issue. The first narrative go around was like there was like a toilet problem or some overflow or something weird like that. We never really got full answers on that. Turns out they were kind of lying about that. It never really happened. But because of a plumbing issue, they had to freeze the election. And then a bunch of other states did the same thing. A bunch of other states froze the election. They froze the counting of votes. And it went on for weeks. And then after they froze the vote, they were like, oh, we started finding new ballots. We found ballots under this table in a large bin. Wow, I forgot it was there. We found ballots in the back of my car. How did I not? Hey, this van that pulled up, we just found a bunch of ballots in this van. We found a bunch of ballots in this airplane coming from another country. Wow, we better count them. Hey, we found these ballots being delivered from Canada. We better count them. Hey, we found all these fake IDs coming from China. I wonder what those were for. Oh, yes, the FBI, 8 years later or 4 years later, says that they had intelligence that China was planning to do this to rig the election. Better hide those documents, which they did, by the way. Trump and the administration found them. Better hide those documents. Hey, we found all these ballots and they're pristine. They look like they've been photocopied. There's no folds on them. They're not written in normal ink. They're exactly the same one to the next. There's no down ballot voting. They look like they were photocopied. Better count all of them. Hey, let's not look at signature verification because none of these can be verified. Let's count them anyway. Every vote counts. And they did that. And then what you watched was that while Trump looked like he was going to win, suddenly it looked like Trump was not going to win. And what you had happen was this. Biden had a vertical spike in votes, straight up. It was crazy. So the trajectory was like this, right? Like this. And this was election night. And then they froze the election, and then Biden went like this. And then it continued like this. Same trajectory like this. But they had the weird bump where they just, hey, Biden won. Don't question it or you're a terrorist. And that was the narrative, right? And so for this reason, Fulton County became a big focus. Then recently something else happened. The Trump administration did something crazy. They sent FBI agents and the director of national intelligence to Georgia, and they raided an election office in Fulton County. Now, some people are saying this is evil. How dare them do that? Why is the director of national intelligence there at an FBI raid? We got to sue them. Fulton County's suing. Give us all those records back. They took tons of records relating to the 2020 election. They want them back. And now, because they want details on what was the legal justification, we are now getting details on the legal justification for the raid on the Fulton County election office. And let me show you what is now being reported in the media. Just the News says this, latest story. The FBI, it says, has substantiated some major irregularities in how votes were counted in Georgia's largest urban area in the aftermath of the 2020 election and is probing whether those failures were intentional efforts to violate federal election law, according to a bombshell affidavit unsealed by a federal court on Tuesday. Basically, this is the story. Trump and his administration, DNI is there, FBI is there, they raid this election office. Critics of this are saying, well, that's crazy. How are you raiding an election office? This is like federalization of the system. They were like, what was the legal justification? It turns out they had a warrant, and the warrant is now public. So we are now publicly getting to see the claims that a judge looked at and authorized the raid based upon. And here's what it says. It says FBI Special Agent Hugh Raymond Evans first filed the affidavit last month to establish probable cause. Remember I talked about probable cause? You need to have a reason for searches and seizures. To establish probable cause for a raid that seized about 700 boxes of Georgia's 2020 elections ballots from a storage warehouse in the Atlanta area, after getting a referral from Trump White House election integrity czar Kurt Olson. Meaning, does anybody remember how Trump appointed an official to lead the investigations of election integrity? The election integrity czar is Kurt Olson, meaning they are investigating it. And that means based upon the investigations, they decided, you know what? We have probable cause, enough evidence, enough claims where we should be able to go in and seize 700 boxes of ballots from the place that was accused of having these issues. And here's what it says. Evans's affidavit, the FBI agents, dated January 28th, cited 5 major areas of irregularities under investigation, including that. Because look, this used to be considered conspiracy theory. If you even said this, there were people who wanted you censored. There were people who wanted you deplatformed. There were people who wanted you literally thrown in prison. I've been accused of this just for talking about it. But now we have an official FBI affidavit, an official court-approved raid stating this. And here's the evidence they say exists. This is a big deal. This is the evidence. Quote, Fulton County has admitted that it does not have scanned images of all the 528,777 ballots, 528,777 ballots counted during the original count, or the 527,925 ballots counted during the state's first recount, meaning they either lost or destroyed some of the evidence. They note, again, this is a major loss of evidence. Now, that might not be criminal, but it's still a big deal. Number 2, it says, Fulton County has confirmed that during the recount of votes, some ballots were scanned multiple times. Let me reread that, okay? When they were recounting the votes, quote, some ballots were scanned multiple times. And if you had an election that was very narrowly won, that's a big deal. Number 3, quote, ballot images made available in response to public record requests show ballots with unique markings duplicated within the ballot images, the affidavit said, quote, unquote. Duplicated ballots, unique markings, duplicated ballots, ballots scanned multiple times. What were these? Well, that might be grounds to ask or raid and get the evidence to look into. This is the next one, number 4, right? Number 4, quote, during the risk limiting audit, auditors counted the votes by hand, reported vote tallies for batches inconsistent with the actual votes within the batch. So, duplicate ballots, ballots scanned multiple times, and hand counts did not reflect the other counts. So if you're counting by hand and your number you come up with is different than the others, what does that tell you? Well, we'll find out maybe. Number 5, quote, the state's Performance Review Board reported that Secretary of State investigators confirmed inaccurate batch tallies from the risk limiting audit. Inaccurate batch tallies, meaning somebody counted the ballots wrong, meaning there was known multiple counting of the same ballots, meaning there were duplicate ballots, meaning something weird happened, they knew something weird happened, and they affirmed it anyway. Why was that? And last of all, it notes, auditors assisting in the risk-limiting audit reported counting purported absentee ballots that, quote, had never been creased or folded, which I just mentioned to you, as would be required for the ballot to be mailed to the voter and for the ballot to be returned in the sealed envelope requiring the voter's signature for authentication. Remember I talked about they call them the pristine ballots. They look like they were photocopied. There were no creases. They were like just laid on top of each other like they came out of a printer. That is what they're referring to. And they note this now. This is official FBI statement. They found these audits that some of us have been talking about since 2020. I have been talking about this ever since then, and we've been attacked for it. We've been demonetized for it. I have. We've been, again, just had everything thrown at us for it. It turns out we were right the entire time. Pristine ballots, not folded, nothing like that. No evidence they were mailed, but counted anyway, and nothing showing proper signature authentication. That's a big deal, okay? Take this all in line of one to the next, and you have a very big problem. This is the evidence that that made the judge justify the raid. This is what gave them the ability to have the FBI and the Director of National Intelligence go and take these boxes. Now it says this: on the day of the deadline to report the recount results, Fulton County reported a recount totaling 511,343 ballots, 17,434 ballots fewer than the original count. So this is a big deal. All right, so let's go over this. Let's put our investigator hats on, okay? When there's a deadline, there's recount results, and the county is reporting a recount, not the original count, that is fewer than the original. And you have evidence. They scanned the same ballots multiple times. There were pristine ballots, no creases to demonstrate they were mailed. There were issues of signature verification, which would have been part of that last part. There were issues of, hand counts not reflecting, I guess, digital counts. I don't know what that would mean. And discrepancies on this. And even despite some ballots being scanned more than others, you come out with 17,000 fewer ballots than the original. How is that possible? If you scanned the same ballots multiple times, if some ballots were duplicates, would that not normally mean you would have more ballots than the initial count, not fewer? So how is it that you would end up, despite rescanning of the same ballots, despite multiple counting the same ballots, despite higher counts on the digital front, you would end up with fewer? So if you have plus, 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 and the result is negative, how is that mathematically possible? It's not really. And they note the following day, Fulton County then reported a total of 527,925 ballots, meaning they suddenly changed it. Very odd things. Now, I can tell you as someone I've been an investigative reporter for a very long time, what do I look at when I do investigations? There are two things I look for. I look for patterns. This is the way things normally work. And then I look for anomalies within patterns. This did not fit the normal pattern. This is an anomaly. This is not the way things are normally done. Typically, if I find a big pattern and there's something that does not fit, that is the thing I will look into as an investigator. I would assume law enforcement uses some of the same criteria. This is the way it's supposed to work. This is how it happened. Many things that reflect normal protocol were not followed, and the results were also not conventional based on the patterns we were originally watching. What happened? Well, that's grounds for investigation. We might finally find out because we've not been given answers until now. All right, folks, we're getting a bit late on the clock. I can go later sometimes, but they're doing construction. We're actually building some studio stuff right now. And so I can't go too long because you're going to get a bunch of noise in the background. Denise B. in the comments, you're saying the computers were taught new math. Yeah, maybe they were. Maybe it's that Common Core math. Maybe they're using Common Core math, right? James Dyson, you're saying, like the pattern of differences between Joe and Donald's curves. Yeah, the bump we saw, right? Made total sense. Let's see. Just reading the YouTube chat. Yeah, Moldegard, you're saying thanks much for the longer show, Josh. Yeah, I'm glad you all like the new show format. Anybody who was watching Crossroads during COVID and so on, you might remember I did a lot more of a casual kind of show. I would jump between questions a lot. we used to have super chat and stuff. It's hard. We don't have it anymore because we've been demonetized since January 6th, which, going back to the election stuff, that's going to be a very big deal, by the way, because if they do show that there was justifiable cause to, have doubts about the results of the election, that means the protests were then justified. That would even legitimize Donald Trump calling for investigations, the dueling electors. That would justify frankly, the calls for looking into all the things. And that would also look into, or justify maybe even some of the protests we saw on January 6th, that these were people concerned about the American Republic effectively being overthrown. The overthrowing of the American Republic. That's a very big deal. And so if it does turn out that Trump was right the whole time, that's going to first of all justify a lot of what we were watching. It will also raise questions of, well, who was it that was on the other side? Was this accidental? Was it a cover-up? Was it a scandal? And if there were people who did in fact do what Trump accused them of doing, I don't even know what crime that would be. A conspiracy to overthrow the United States or a conspiracy against the Constitution. That'd be a very big deal. Is that the case? Was this accidental? Is this all a conspiracy right now? We will find out because they're now investigating it. But Trump right now is kind of, supposed to be, if you shoot, don't miss. If they're launching investigations into Trump's allegations of voter fraud, if they're right, that's going to be a big deal. If they're wrong and there was no fraud, it's going to backfire on Trump and it's going to look very bad. He's going all in, right? He's playing blackjack, and he just went all in. We'll have to find out. Now, before we end, my new show. I have a new show now. It's called the Josh Philipp Show. That is now out. You can watch it on YouTube. And today we're going to be releasing a brand new episode that's going to be 4 p.m. Eastern Time. 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Tune in today. Be sure to watch that on YouTube. I'll be going into how artificial intelligence has effectively ended intellectual property. And this is going to raise a whole bunch of issues. Let me paint a picture. If you invent something, if you write a song and you violate copyright, you will be sued. And there are businesses, there are governments using artificial intelligence to basically document everything, and they're suing everybody. This could be the end of intellectual property or the creation of a monopoly on all creative enterprise. This is a very interesting topic. Again, join me 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. I'll be talking about it. That's on the Josh Philipp Show. Brand new show on YouTube, 4 p.m. today, Eastern Time. You can click the link below to watch that. And also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's a brand new channel. You can search on YouTube, the Josh Philipp Show, and let me know what you all think about it. Again, link in the chat. Check it out. And also, folks, thank you so much for being here. Until next time, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.